Hey, what's up, you guys? It's Toby Rosario, and today we're going to talk about what do you do when you find a seller that's willing to sell their property below market value. You have it under contract. You actually find a buyer, and he wants to buy the property. So what do you do next? What are the steps in between, or the whole from A to Z? What happens? Okay, so you say you have a property under contract. We're gonna use simple numbers here. The house is worth 100 grand. You have it under contract for 40 grand. I'm just gonna use very simple numbers to keep this very simple. Uh, the house is worth 100 grand fixed up. You have it under contract for 40 grand. You market that property, let's say for 50 grand. You find a buyer that's willing to pay you 50 grand. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to collect. Well, first of all, you're going to want to collect a EMD, earnest money deposit, from your buyer, a $2,000 non-refundable deposit, and you're going to make him sign a assignment contract. So basically, that assignment contract gives him the right to your contract that you have with the seller. You want him to put that deposit down either in your name or the title company's name. Typically, it's the title company's name. You can hold it in escrow. So you have a buyer, and he gives you that deposit. If he kind of depending on the buyer, some buyers don't want to give that much upfront. I do a minimum of a thousand, but typically it's 2,000. But if you just want some validation that they're real serious buyers, so they want to put a deposit down. Then you're going to send all the paperwork to the title company. What's going to happen is they're going to run a title search. And what they're looking for is any liens, judgments on the property, because they have to provide clear title before they can transfer the deed. They have to provide clear title so they can sell they're able to sell the property. So once title clears, you set up a closing date. And in that closing date, what happens is the seller is going to come down and sign all the paperwork. The buyer is going to come down, bring the money to the table. The buyer is going to bring 50,000 plus closing costs. Don't forget that the buyer always pays closing costs. You always use that when you're negotiating with the seller. You're going to tell the seller that you'll pay closing costs. The buyer pays closing costs, but you're not the buyer. The buyer is the person you're going to assign the contract to. So the buyer is going to bring 50,000 plus closing costs. So the seller is going to get 40 grand minus any taxes or any liens or anything like that, any judgments that are due on their part. And then the buyer, so they're going to net whatever that net is, whatever minus taxes, any liens, judgments that they owe, they're going to net that. Then the buyer is going to bring 50,000 plus closing costs. You're going to keep that 10,000. So you're going to net 10,000. And that's pretty much it. That's the process from when you get a seller to sell you their house. You put it in a contract for a price. Then you're going to market for a buyer. And that buyer, if he's willing to pay whatever you market it for, you're going to keep the difference. So you're going to make him sign a assignment contract, and that assignment contract gives him the right to the contract you have with the seller. And when you sign that contract with the seller, you have equitable interest, which gives you the right to market that property. You have control of that property. So you're gonna sign a purchase and sale agreement with the seller, and then you're gonna sign an assignment contract with the buyer. And it'll tell you, it basically just says that you're assigning the rights to the contract with the seller to the end buyer, which is John Doe or whatever. And then at closing, you're gonna get that difference minus their deposit. So if he gave you a $2,000 deposit, you're gonna get $8,000 at closing. And that's basically the whole process from A to Z. I try to simplify it so you can kind of get a better overview idea of how the whole process works. There's more to it, obviously, but if the title's clear, the seller's willing to sell that property at a discount, and the buyer's willing to pay more than what you have it on the contract for, then you're gonna make money. So that's pretty much it, guys. So that's pretty much the simplest explanation from start to finish of how a wholesale deal happens. So that's it.